I want to be daring, baby, dance the night away. I let my hair down if I want. Don't you just get tired chasing fame and being pretty all the time? Does it sound like fun? You can do better. Let me show you what a good time looks like. You can do better. You can do better. Let me show you what a good time looks like. You can do better. I dare you to be wilder.
And what is going on, Nerds of Wrestling, and welcome to today's episode, the very first episode of What's Up Nerds, a podcast by Nerds of Wrestling. I am your host, Justin Del Rio, along with my co-host, Dylan Braccia. Dylan, dude, it's finally happening. It's here. What's Up Nerds is here. How do you feel, man?
We are live and in person. Oh, this is so great. I'm so happy to finally be able to co-host the show with you. Here we are, dude, first time, man.
Dude, I'm so happy to have you by my side. Our guest today is Julie Cutler. Julie, what is going on? How are you today?
Hello, guys. Thank you so much for having me, first of all. I wanted to tell you that this is actually my first wrestling podcast that I've done, hopefully the first of many. So yes, I'm excited to just dive right in.
We are very excited to have you, a fellow nerd, two nerds.
Oh, yes. I am very much a self-proclaimed nerd, so.
Hey.
We just want to discuss more wrestling, Julie, tell us a little bit about you. What got you into wrestling, how did you really just get into it as a fan?
Absolutely. So, I am a very long time fan. A lot of people are also very surprised when they found out what a hardcore wrestling fan I am, because I think if you saw me just kind of from the outside, I'm very much like that girly girl. I do dance. I'm doing my first beauty pageant this spring, which is very exciting. So I very much read as like the girl who's like Elle Woods from Legally Blonde. I've been told that I'm her in real life, but I also grew up with two older brothers. And so when I would guess about 6 years old, I want to say I was like 6 going on 7, because I think it was the end of my first grade year. That's kind of when I fell in love with wrestling for the first time, because right around that time, one of my older brothers and one of our close family friends, who's also basically like a brother to me at this point, they were kind of getting into wrestling right around that time. And so at the time, again, I was super young. I was a little girl. And I just remember like my first memory, I think I was playing in my family room one day and my brother had wrestling on TV. I think it was a Saturday. So I don't know if it was like a taped show that he was just watching back, or I remember they used to have like Velocity on Saturdays and they used to have Sunday Night Heat. So I don't know if it was right. So I don't know if it was something like that. I honestly don't remember the exact context. I don't remember the exact match. I think the Dudley Boys were wrestling, but I don't remember any of the specifics. But I just started watching it with him, and being so young, I kind of followed in my older brother's footsteps in a lot of different ways. And, it was easy for me as a little kid to sort of like, he was playing the video games, he was playing with the action figures, we were doing all the stuff. And so I kind of started doing it with him. And I think at that young age, it's interesting because when you're so little, there's so much of the athleticism that you don't really understand yet. And obviously, as I've gotten older, I've learned to appreciate that side of wrestling much more, the technical side of wrestling. But when you're young, you don't know as much about that. I mean, you learn the names of the moves and things like that, but there's a lot of the training that goes into it that you just don't have that visibility into yet. So I think that the thing that really drew me in as a little kid was the storytelling aspect, because that was something that I did understand. And that, I mean, obviously, I think at that point, being more of like the Attitude Era, that was like my childhood, there was a lot of like very cutting edge storytelling that might have gone a little over my head at that point in time. But nonetheless, I really fell in love with the storytelling that happens with the the promos and the backstage interactions between people and how every single match advances the story that ultimately leads up to the pay-per-view. So I remember, as a kid, obviously, when we were young, when we were little, I don't know specifically how old you guys are, but I know we're all kind of like similar age bracket.
I'm 27.
Same. Okay, cool. Oh, Dylan, you're a baby.
Dylan's a baby.
Yeah.
But I mean, at that point in time, obviously, social media was also like not part of the equation. The internet in general was like kind of there, but not so much where like when a pay-per-view is happening, you were getting like all of the highlights on social media right away. So I remember as a kid, I mean, now it's so easy to get the pay-per-views, right? If you have the WWE Network, or if you're Peacock, or if you have Bleacher Report, whatever. But I remember as a kid, like you didn't always have the easy access to the pay-per-views, right? Because it's your parents have to pay for it for you. So I remember my older brother and I going online and like trying to find like these certain websites that would post pay-per-view results as they were happening. We're like waiting in front of the computer, like seeing who's gonna win.
Keep refreshing the page.
That was what we did. And we would always watch together as kids. And then I even remember like when you used to go to the store and rent videos, we'd always be renting like old wrestling pay-per-views, and we would kind of catch ourselves up on a little bit of the history, a little bit of what had happened sort of before our time as well, and watching some of the old pay-per-views together. So I remember I always thought that I kind of knew a good amount about wrestling from a very young age. I actually remember when WWF first became WWE. And I remember I was in second grade. I was in science class at school, and there were a couple boys in my class that were talking about wrestling. And I told them, I was like, you guys, I just found out that WWF is now going to turn into WWE because they have the same, initials as the World Wildlife Foundation, I believe it was. And so that was the trademark issue. And I was telling them about that because I got a lot of this info just from my older brothers that were like a little more in the know and would find this stuff out online. So I was telling other boys in my class, and they were like, no, like that's not true. That's not happening. And then what do you know? So I always thought that I learned from a young age because I grew up with older people that were into it that kind of like brought me into that world at a young age.
Going through the time you were watching wrestling, when you first discovered wrestling, do you remember any wrestlers that really, grabbed your attention?
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I always reference like a couple of the matches that I think that drew me in at a very young age. An obvious one, and I think a lot of people are going to say Hell in a Cell with Undertaker and Mankind, King of the Ring, 1998. That's like, everyone's going to say that.
Right.
But a couple others, the first two TLC matches were really big for me. I remember my brother was a big Jeff Hardy fan. So I feel like he kind of influenced me on that a little bit. And then the street fight between Triple H and
Shawn Michaels.
No, I was actually I was gonna say the street fight between Triple H and Cactus Jack at Royal Rumble 2000. That was another one that really influenced me. But I would say in terms of like my favorite wrestlers, I think I will say some of my favorite wrestlers are people that for me have been very consistent over the years. One of my all-time favorites, I love Chris Jericho. And the reason that I think I'm so attached to him is because he's someone who's been in the game for so long, and he just consistently recreates himself over time. He always recreates himself. He always finds a way to make himself interesting. And the thing is, like, I feel like sometimes over the years, people will make attempts to reinvent themselves. Like if someone is, consistently sort of a baby face, like maybe they want to try out the heel thing for a little bit. Maybe they change up their gear. Maybe they change up their look.
Right.
And sometimes it doesn't really do it for me. But I feel like Jericho is somebody who every single time, at least for me, every single time that he reinvents himself, it's always brilliant. I can't think of a bad gimmick, at least off the top of my head, that he's done. And even in AEW too, like I think he's, even over the course of the past couple of years, I feel like he's kind of gone through a little bit of an evolution character wise, even just, in his recent career. And he always comes up with, with Le Champion and the Demo God. Like he's always coming up with new things, and it always works for me. I actually have, when I met him several years ago, I have a list of Jericho that I had made that I had him sign, and I kind of used that as something that I had. Whenever I met someone who was like super influential to me, who was like one of my favorite performers, I always kind of like saved that as like something special for them to sign. So I actually have that in a frame in my bedroom, because
awesome.
Even when I was little, I had a crush on Chris Jericho when I was a little girl, and even I'm 27 now, and he's still the GOAT in my opinion. Just thinking, but even when I look back on his WWE debut, I look back at that segment. I look back at the when he was going through his little phase where he was best friends with Kevin Owens, and they did the I can't remember the name of it off my head. The little ceremony of friendship.
Ceremony of friendship.
Yeah, the Festival of Friendship. The Festival of Friendship. That, and then I was actually at I think that was WrestleMania 33
in Florida,
in Orlando. I was there when they had the match that kind of culminated that friendship that turned into a feud. But just when I think back to all of these different time periods in his career, there's something that was special about each one and memorable about each one. And there's never a period that I look at and I'm like, oh, like that really didn't work for me. So that's something that I will always admire about him. And I think even in AEW now, like I said, he's especially with the Inner Circle, he's really found a way to not only continue to be relevant himself, but he's found a way to elevate younger talent as well. And that was something that I was saying actually at one of the recent events that we went to for Northeast Wrestling in Danbury. I met Matt Hardy there, and he was with Private Party, and I was talking about how I think it's really smart that AEW is pairing some of these well-known, more established guys, Jericho, Matt Hardy, Sting, with some of the younger guys. And in doing that, everyone knows who Sting is. Everyone knows who Chris Jericho is.
Right.
I didn't know a lot about Sammy Guevara at first. I didn't know a lot about Darby Allin at first. But I think in working with the more experienced talent, they've really been able to elevate those younger guys to where now, like, I think, Darby, Sammy, Private Party, like a lot of those guys have become really strong in terms of their character, in terms of their fan base in a short period of time, because they just figured out how to put together like this really good partnership between the guys that are a little bit older and, they're still thriving in their careers, but they kind of know when to step back as well and, give these younger guys the push. So another thing that I admire about Jericho is he knows how to help the younger guys get over while still staying relevant and still staying entertaining himself.
The thing, so I love how you mentioned that, because the thing about AEW is you were naming all these wrestlers, Chris Jericho, Matt Hardy, Sting. These guys are already well established in the wrestling scene where they don't need the win. They don't need to go over on AEW. One match I always go back to, and it was one of the first matches in AEW history. Look at the Young Bucks versus the Private Party in 2019 in that tag team tournament. The Bucks beat over the Private Party, and I just remember watching that match. I'm like, holy shit! Like, they just put over these younger guys on national TV. Like that just goes to show how much respect these veterans have for this young tag team, because they know what these tag teams, they know what these younger guys are made of in wrestling. So that's something very, hats off to AEW for that.
Yeah.
And thank you, Julie, for kind of talking about that for a little bit.
And on that same note, I mean, I can think of a couple of matches that AEW's done where I thought that they did that really well. One that actually came to my mind as you were talking about that was the match that Jericho had with Jungle Boy, when he kind of did the whole shtick of like, oh, like I'll give you 10 minutes. Like I'm sure I could beat you in less than 10 minutes. And we're big Jungle Boy stans in this household. We love Jungle. I was so happy actually that he got the win last night. I thought of anything that they can do to like push him to the moon, I'm all about it. But I was really, really glad that Jericho had that match with him, because despite the outcome, despite the fact, I think it was I think they did a 10-minute time limit for the match because of what he had said. But it was a really good showing for Jungle Boy, and like the crowd. I remember the crowd being super hot for that match, and you could just tell the way Jericho sold everything in the match. Just the psychology, the in-ring psychology that the two of them had. It was just perfect to really put Jungle Boy on everyone's radar, and for the fans to be like, all right, like this kid can go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He did a really good job of facilitating that. And I think with Sammy Guevara too, like I remember I think it was the first episode of Dynamite ever. I want to say it was like when Sammy had a match with Cody. I think that was one of the first matches on the show. And I remember he did the whole thing where like he came out with the panda head. And at that point, like I didn't know much about Sammy Guevara, I didn't have much investment in Sammy Guevara. And look at how far his character has come since then, since they established the Inner Circle and since he got paired up with Jericho. And I feel like he's someone who's really good at being silly and kind of poking fun at himself. And he and Jericho complement each other very well in that way. They really let that part of his personality come out, and that's part of what makes his character so lovable. And also just the fact that he's willing to do absolutely insane spots. I mean, last night, the spot that he did off the top of the ladder, and the match that he had with Matt. Well, he had a couple matches with Matt Hardy, but I mean, he did absolutely insane stuff in both of them. And I mean, for someone to be willing to put their body on the line like that to make a name for themselves, like kudos to him.
Sammy Guevara is like already over as fuck in AEW, and I felt like I knew a little bit about him before AEW, but like not much. Again, AEW is doing something very well with bringing in all these young guys and introducing them to a wider audience who a lot of people may not know. Like, who's who's Sammy Guevara? Back in 2019, nobody could have known him. AEW Dark is something that I'm a massive fan of, because you're bringing in all these independent wrestlers to wrestle on a big stage. Dylan, look at all these people who wrestled for Dark recently.
You got Man Scout's been on there. You got a lot of guys that are Northeast Wrestling. We see them all the time over here.
We had Waves and Curls on there recently.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I know. I've seen Megan Bain on AEW Dark a couple times. I know she was at one of the last Northeast Wrestling events that I went to.
Yeah,
she's oh my gosh, she's gorgeous. I love her gimmick. Amazing physique. She's gonna do amazing. I was really happy.
Knocking it out of the park. It's insane.
I was really glad to see her at one of the last Northeast Wrestling events. That's another thing that I love about those events too. I know that we all have gone to them. I've gone to them for years.
Yeah,
but I love. It's a really good opportunity actually for. I have a couple of friends who are wrestling independently right now, and I feel like I'm always trying to put over their events, because I feel like they do a really good job of bringing in some pretty big names and mixing them with a lot of up and coming talent. So even just for the meet and greets, like if you set up a table there and you've got some 8x10s and you're next to Will Ospreay and you're next to Eddie Kingston or whoever. Yeah, I mean, it's a really easy way just to be seen and to make some money on your merch. People see you there and they're there for maybe the big names that they know and love, but they start to see more of these up and coming people, and then maybe you get thrown in the mix where you have the opportunity to work a match with someone, and maybe the audience might not know you yet, but they know them and they're starting to get invested in the match because of this other person that they know, and then now they're looking at you and they're saying, oh, like this person held their own against them, and they're seeing how your ability to work with this other person, and they might fall in love with you because of that. So I'm always pushing people that I know if they're wrestling independently. I think a lot of people kind of fall into the trap of kind of wrestling in the same place all the time, which is great because, I mean, on one hand, you build up a fan base for that in that one place or for that one company that you're working for. But, and of course, social media is a huge tool too, to help get your name out there to other people. But I'm like, go travel, go to a different state, go to different promotions.
Go help out, go
get your name out there.
If you have people if you have a couple friends, reach out to that promoter and say, we can work a match together. Give them, put yourself over, give them your credentials. I'm big on trying to put over like anyone that I know who's wrestling independently. I'm always big into like trying to give people ideas. I'm like, go put yourself out there, like go after this opportunity. Make yourself a big cartel, put your merch out there, sell your 8x10s. But I really do think it's important to put yourself out there in front of different audiences. Make sure you're seen by different people. You might be known by one audience in your local area, but go find other promotions with a decent following and put yourself out there too. And maybe those people won't know you yet, but you never know who's going to be in the audience. You never know who's going to see you. You never know what opportunities that's going to bring along. So if anyone needs an agent,
hey, if anyone needs an agent, Julie's your girl.
Julie knows what she's talking about here.
Hit her up. We were talking about Northeast Wrestling a while ago. When did you discover, Northeast Wrestling?
Oh God. I didn't start going to the events until maybe like 2016, 2017.
Hey,
it was probably like once I graduated from school and I started working full time and I really had like the more of the disposable income where I could start investing more in traveling and going to events as I please. But I mean, I'd probably heard of them years before because they've actually been in my city as well. Ironically enough, I haven't been to the events that have been in my own city, but I've traveled to other states to go and see them. But it probably wasn't until I was a little bit, probably like 21 was when I graduated from school. That was probably when I got to the point where I, had more of the financial flexibility where I was starting to travel a little bit more and go to different events. And that's kind of across the board too, to be honest, with even with, WWE, AEW. That was more of when I started, for certain pay-per-views that I was really invested in, would start planning vacations around them and things like that. And going to, fan access or whatever at Mania, whatever kind of event I could get my hands on.
Right.
And I know now, actually, one thing that I'm very excited about is AEW actually has a group called AEW Heels, which is a group that's targeted towards female wrestling fans, which I actually thought was very cool because I do think, during my travels, just in my experiences, the vast majority of wrestling fans that I've seen, at least, at events, are male. And so it's nice to kind of have a community that's targeted towards women in wrestling. And so I know they, during the pandemic, they did a lot of events over Zoom, little parties over Zoom and things like that, little Q&As and different things themed for different holidays. But I know that now that things have kind of started to open up more in person, they're starting to do more heels meet and greets. I know they had mentioned at some point potentially doing like specific tickets or specific sections of the audience for members of AEW heels.
That's awesome.
I don't know that they've done that yet, but I was really excited to, have a little community like that where you could kind of meet other women that are wrestling fans and kind of get to interact as well with like the AEW glam team. And because that's another thing that I'm kind of into on the side, is the whole like hair makeup scene. It's like the AEW glam team and some of the people behind the scenes that kind of make everything happen. So it's nice to kind of build that little community and including not just the fans, but including the women in the company as well.
Well, now that we're talking about AEW, I got to know, Full Gear last night.
Yes.
I know you watched it.
Oh, yes, I did.
What is your reactions to the show last night? What are your thoughts and opinions on it?
All in all, I thought it was a pretty good show. There honestly was not one match that I didn't like. Like I thought that every single match on the card was solid. I will say I absolutely loved All Out, and there were so many surprises in All Out. I did think that was a difficult pay-per-view to follow.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But there were a couple of matches last night that I really enjoyed. One of them being the street fight, the 10-man tag street fight. The one thing that I noticed about this, I don't know if you guys noticed this or if anybody else noticed, but one thing I was watching last night with my brother and our close family friend, who I mentioned is also like a brother of mine. We're all watching it together. So the beginning of the street fight with American Top Team and the Men of the Year in the Inner Circle, they all got on the ring apron as though like they're about to get ready to do like just like a standard tag match, like they're all getting ready to tag in, and we're all like, isn't this a street fight? We were like, what are you guys doing? And then like that quickly disappeared over the course of the match. But we were talking about it. We were like, the internet's gonna go insane over this. Like, I was like, what are the people on Twitter saying? Because I don't have Twitter anymore. I might, maybe at some point I'll get back on there. But I was like, Twitter's got to be going nuts over this right now. Yeah. But I did think that was a very good match. They had the Sammy Guevara high spot.
Oh my
I really loved at the end of the match the interaction between Dan Lambert and Jericho, and also just like the little tribute that Jericho did to Eddie Guerrero at the end of the match. Obviously, the timing of that was very meaningful. And I'm sure that there are a lot of people in the wrestling world that really appreciated him making a point to do that. I thought that was a very strong match. I actually thought the women's championship match between Britt Baker and Ty Conti was probably, in my opinion, one of the best women's matches that AEW's seen at this point. And I think that this was a match that really took Ty Conti. Like, I feel like this was a career-changing match for her. She really brought it. And I mean, I absolutely love Britt Baker as a heel. I think
I love her too.
The way that I think at first, when she first started, it's obviously hard if you're used to being a babyface all the time,
right? And
you're taking on this heel character for the first time, you're settling into it. It's hard to find that groove, but I feel like she found that groove pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah.
And once she did, I love heel Britt Baker.
She took it to a whole nother level. She's killing it. I mean, she's been killing it for the past year.
She has.
She really has been.
I applaud her because I know that was something that was different for her, and she was, stepping out of her comfort zone in order to try to do that. And it was, in my opinion, a time where stepping out of your comfort zone and trying something different was very, very successful for her. And so I love the Britt Baker character. I love the DMD.
Yeah.
And I love that the fans have gotten so hooked on doing that with her. And I thought Ty Conti's performance last night, this again, I think it was a career-changing match for her. Her stamina throughout the entire match was incredible. The little high spot that she did, I gave her kudos for that. You could see that she was really pushing herself to a new level. Her gear was on point, hair and makeup. Shout out to AW Glam Team on point. She looked incredible. I thought that was a very strong match. And I was really glad because you can see, at first the women's division in AEW is very small. And you can see over time they're signing more and more people. And across the board in AEW, not just within the women's division, but across the board with all of the young up and coming talent that like maybe you don't know as well, maybe you don't know as much about them. You can really see over the course of the past couple of years how they've elevated some of those people. And so that match for me was a big success. I know MJF and Darby started out the show. Those are, two of the other four pillars of AEW, which I give them so much credit for the way that they've built up those four guys. I thought it was hilarious that MJF won the match with a headlock takeover. I think the rest of the internet thought that was pretty hilarious as well. But again, I don't think I've seen a bad MJF match, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I totally agree.
There was actually one match, I think it was his match from Revolution last year, the feud that he did with Cody. And I didn't realize this until afterwards. I think it was actually Enzo who was talking about that match. And he mentioned MJF taking a standing suplex from the inside of the ring to the outside of the ring and landing on 2 feet. And he was like, if I were in gorilla position and I were watching that, like I would be freaking out. Yeah. So I went back and I watched it again and I watched that one specific spot and I was like, oh yeah. I was like, how did we not acknowledge like how amazing that was? But he is just someone, obviously like his character speaks for himself. He's just like the master of being a heel. There was the promo that he cut with Darby a couple weeks back that was like, it got a little real. And I know some people were saying like, this is like a little too real for us. And I think I read online, articles about people saying like, we didn't really like that promo. It went a little too far. And, we can all think about it what we want if we think he went a little too far. But he's, whether he goes too far sometimes or not, like he is who he is. And he's unapologetically a heel.
Yeah. And
there aren't a lot of people that could pull that off to the extent that he does.
Yeah.
And in his technical wrestling ability as well, he doesn't have to do anything crazy. I mean, a lot of the flippy stuff, there have been videos he's shared, I know on social media, where he's showing, he's like, I can do this stuff.
Right.
If I'm just training at Create a Pro, which I know is, I think he and Chris Statlander are both trained there with, oh God, I'm forgetting who they trained with now. It'll come back to me. But like he's, posted little snippets of him just like, doing whatever on his own in the ring there and just showing people, yeah, I can do this stuff, but I don't need to.
Right.
Because, I can keep it simple. I can keep it old school and I can still put on a great match and the character work speaks for itself. So, that was a solid match. I really liked the match with the Young Bucks, Adam Cole, and Jurassic Express and Christian Cage. I was really happy that Jungle Boy got the win. We love Jungle Boy in this house. We want to push him to the moon. We stand for Jungle Boy, so I was very happy about that. And also, there were a couple of very good table spots in that match.
Yeah.
The elbow drop table spot, that was a very good elbow drop. That was probably one of my favorites overall on the show. I really enjoy the Young Bucks as heels. I enjoy their heel ring gear. They always have very obnoxious ring gear that I think, and you can, and like the facial hair and everything. They put so much thought into all of the little details of how they present themselves. Coming out with
facial hair. That
Yeah.
makes
Oh
them
yeah.
Like assholes.
Yeah.
Yes. Exactly.
Facial hair.
Coming out to the ring with Michael Nakazawa dressed like a football coach, and Brandon Cutler with the tracksuit doing what it's gold, and Don Callis, whatever he does,
The
gold.
master himself. Yes.
But that was another high spot for me. High point of the show was that match. I'm just really happy to see whenever they're able to give younger guys the opportunity to shine. Again, Christian Cage is another person. They kind of paired him off with Jungle Boy, and you've kind of been able to see. I already think Jungle Boy was on the verge of becoming a star regardless, but I think that their partnership is just another little thing to keep elevating him. And so I really loved that match. I thought the pace of it was good. I know sometimes Young Bucks matches, there's so much that happens. It's like everything happens in the match, and at the end you're just like, I remember I went to Fighter Fest 2019. That was one of the first shows.
So jealous.
AEW put, it was amazing atmosphere. And I remember that show. It was just like one of those matches where like the Young Bucks did like absolutely every move that they know, and you're just like, that was amazing, but what just happened? And I really enjoyed the pace of this match. I felt like it wasn't too much. It wasn't overkill. You can tell some of the hardcore stuff they're doing. You can tell Tony Khan has a little soft spot for ECW with some of the use of weapons that they bring in during the street fights and things like that. Especially recently. I feel like they've done a lot of that recently. Maybe it's just me. I know, like on Rampage a couple of weeks ago, I think it was the match with Abaddon and
Britt Baker.
Was it Britt Baker?
Yeah.
They've been doing a lot of that. They've been doing a lot of that recently. Yeah. But I think if they I don't want them to overdo it. But I think if they kind of find a sweet spot for that, there's a time and a place where that is entertaining, and where it has the shock factor and the drama factor. As long as they kind of keep that at bay and use it wisely, I think they'll be okay. But you can definitely tell Tony Khan has a soft spot for ECW.
Tony Khan is like definitely someone who's very lenient, like you said. Well, very solid to the ACW too, but like he's very lenient with what the wrestlers do and don't do. I mean, which is something I love about AEW. Obviously, these guys are pulling out Canadian destroyers left and right. They're doing some crazy shit that you definitely would not see in WWE. What is your take on AEW compared to WWE right now?
Sure.
Obviously, there's so much going on in WWE. What are your thoughts on that?
Right. So I know you're gonna see some people that are hardcore AEW stans. You're gonna see some people that are very, very loyal to WWE. I obviously grew up on WWE. That was what inspired my love of wrestling in the first place. And I definitely think that there's pros and cons on both sides. So with WWE, obviously, there has been a lot of talk recently about all of the releases that they've had over the course of really the whole pandemic.
Yeah, like the whole year, right?
Yeah.
And there's some that I feel very badly about. I know this last round of releases, Keith Lee was a big topic of conversation. Karrion Kross and Scarlett, I thought that they had so much potential to do so much in WWE. So I was very disappointed about that one. So there's definitely, pros and cons on both sides. Obviously that was getting a lot of negative attention recently. But there's also no arguing with the fact that WWE does have some of the most incredible, talented performers in the world. They still have top tier level talent. I will say, I think the thing that has been lacking for me recently is the storytelling. I'm sorry, I just was trying to wipe something on my screen. The storytelling aspect hasn't really been pulling me in. There have been, at least on TV, I feel like some of the matches are perhaps a little bit repetitive for me right now, and there hasn't been as much of that deep storytelling aspect. But on the flip side, in AEW, I think some of the long-term storytelling that they've done, particularly with like MJF and some of the guys in the Elite, the storytelling that they did with Kenny and Hangman leading up to the world title match, that had been going on for a long time. And so I think that they've been doing some very good long-term storytelling. Some of the short-term storytelling might fall a little short in some areas. I will say the difference between WWE and AEW in that regard is I do think, and people can look at this in different ways, whether, one is better than the other. Right. I think that sometimes if WWE is pursuing a story and they feel like it's not working for whatever reason, they'll just kind of quietly drop it. Whereas in AEW, if something's not working, I think they have more of a tendency to not drop it without finding a way to sort of wrap it up quickly. Quickly, quietly, whatever. I think they kind of wrap it up before they put it to the side and forget about it. Whereas sometimes if WWE is doing something and they just don't think it's working, they'll just like forget about it, pretend like it never happened.
Which we all know it happened.
Yeah, it's all the time.
Right. And I think you can kind of argue both ways as to, which is better than the other. It's kind of like if something's not working, like just let it go. Just let it go. Don't keep trying to make fetch happen when fetch isn't going to happen.
Oh, whereas my brother will love that reference.
Whereas, some people might say, well, even if it's not working, just wrap it up. Give us some ending and wrap it up. So, I think you could look at it both ways as to which you think is the smarter way to go. But that's one difference that I've noticed. There's a couple stories with AEW. I won't call them out, but there's a couple stories in particular, maybe shorter term stories in AEW that I didn't think worked as well. And they did find a way to sort of quietly end it and move on. Whereas with WWE, they might just not acknowledge it the next week. So it's kind of up to the viewer, I think, what they would prefer, what they think is kind of a smarter way of going about it. The other thing is, too, WWE's been releasing a ton of talent recently. AEW has a huge roster right now. So, on the flip side, there's a balance, too, of how much talent do you want?
Right.
I know probably a couple years ago before the pandemic, a lot of people were thinking that WWE was kind of stockpiling talent. They were really signing a lot of people from the independent scene at that point in time. And, then you kind of had the opposite argument of like WWE is just hoarding people. So
what I say, Dylan?
Yeah,
I say?
He did say that.
I said
so
that.
you do need a balance. I think with some of the releases, it's difficult because there are people that are getting released that are extremely talented and that, the fans were invested in and wanted to, we wanted to see them succeed. And it feels like the booking just didn't let that happen for them. I think, for me, Karrion Kross and Scarlett, I'm like, he is a guy who they had an incredible entrance. He's got a great look. He can talk. He seemed like he had all the potential. Scarlett's gorgeous. She didn't really get the opportunity to do, what she could offer in the ring. They never really gave her that chance in NXT. I think splitting them up was a bad idea. I think a lot of people think that was a bad idea. I would have loved to see them together on the main roster. But for whatever reason, that didn't happen and they got released. And so we're kind of all thinking like, well, there's so much you could have done with them, right? And so I think that's the challenging thing about the releases is there's a lot of people that we actually love and we are invested in and we want to see them. We want to see what could have happened with them. But I will say, again, WWE being the company that they are, being super established, they're going to have a very, very high level of professionalism. They're going to have some of the greatest talent in the world regardless. And I think that their pay-per-views, maybe despite some of the storytelling not really being up to par for something that I think would really invest me in that aspect of what they do, they're putting on great technical matches, and the pay-per-view matches themselves are very, very good. I know I unfortunately didn't get to see all of Crown Jewel yet. That's one that I need to catch up on. But
I didn't even watch it.
There were a lot of people that spoke very, very highly of it, and I know that a lot of those matches, in terms of star ratings, did very well. And that was one of the best, most highly rated pay-per-views that they've done in a long time. So, I mean, there's two sides of the coin. I know in terms of storytelling, in terms of that aspect of the art form that's really going to pull me in. I really have been leaning towards AEW myself recently, but I'm definitely open to the possibility that this can, go back and forth over time, just depending on, which company is bringing to the table what I want them to bring to the table. And right now, AEW is really doing it for me in a lot of ways. And I do give them credit for the fact that despite being a newer company, and despite only being around for a couple of years, I've definitely seen the growth from where they started to where they are now in terms of production quality, camera angles, how they're capturing important parts of the match. They've definitely come a long way with that from when they first started out on TV to now. Right. You can see, I know I've said this a couple of times, but the younger talent really starting to look like stars and really starting to be acknowledged as stars by the fan base, people falling in love with their character and them really coming into their own in who their character is, kind of finding that sweet spot and falling into their groove, finding who they are. So, definitely pros and cons on both sides. I will say, I think that the women's division in WWE was very, very strong for a while. I was one of those people. I absolutely loved Evolution. I loved I loved the roster that they had at that point in time. I think it's unfortunate that they released, in those releases, I feel like they kind of dwindled down the women's division a little bit. But like I said, AEW is really starting to elevate their women's division as well. I think that the pay-per-view match last night was a testament to that. And I'm really excited to see what they keep doing going forward. There's a lot of free agents out there. There's a lot of really good free agents out there. Some people that have appeared on Dark that I think would have a lot of potential if they wanted to sign them. And so I'm here for the ride.
Well, I mean, Dylan, holy shit, Julie just took everything.
That sums up everything about AEW WWE,
Right. I mean, holy shit. What I do want to ask though is, a lot of people were very upset. You mentioned the name Keith Lee being released. Where do you see him going? Like, because obviously the options for him are endless. Like, he'll go anywhere and he'll be over like that.
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. It's hard because, now people have so many options. If they want to go to AEW, if they want to go to Impact, I feel like Impact's really picked up a lot of steam over the past several months, some of the signings that they've gotten. If they want to go to Japan, they can go to Japan. I know some of the people from Japan have started spending more time here in the U.S. doing different, even if you just want to do independent bookings. If you just want to do, I know that seems to be a lot of what Enzo does. I know, we've seen more of Will Ospreay in the United States recently. I know both of them have gotten opportunities with MLW. So it's hard to say. I think everyone could kind of give their own opinion about where they'd like to see him. I know another thing, too, is a lot of people are very wary about AEW becoming very saturated with ex-WWE talent. Right. But I don't necessarily see it that way. Right. I'm personally, when I see a name of someone that I know and love and they show up in a company where they have a little more creative freedom, perhaps, to really live out their character, in the way that they envisioned it themselves, with a little bit of guidance here and there, obviously, right. but really live out that character in the way that makes them happy and in the way that is authentic. I'm excited to see that. I know some people are saying, oh, like a lot of the roster, like this guy was in WWE. I mean, a lot of people, even if they weren't in WWE for very long, I mean, there's a lot of people that have been in developmental or, had or in WWE. I mean, look at Trent. I mean, Trent was in WWE years ago, but I mean, that's not. I'm not like, oh, that's a WWE guy, right?
Yeah, he didn't do shit in WWE. I mean,
right?
nobody. I think someone told me like 2015 he was in WWE. I was like, really? Come on, I didn't know that.
But I don't necessarily see it as being a negative thing as long as they use everyone properly. Like I said, if they use them in such a way where they're getting to do their character in a way that is authentic to them and in a way that really connects with the audience in a way that maybe we've never gotten to experience before. And also pairing them, using them with other people in fresh matchups that we haven't seen before. Like I mentioned, with maybe some of the older, more established guys that don't need to have a million matches. They don't need to have a 20-minute match. Sting doesn't need to have a 20, 30-minute match.
He can't.
But if you use him strategically, I mean, the match that he had, the tag match that he did with Darby against Men of the Year, that was exactly what it needed to be. That was just enough. We got to see the version of Sting that we know and love. We got a good match from the Men of the Year too, and we got to see Darby kind of go up a notch because of his pairing with Sting and giving him, a lot of the time in the match to really do what he can do and kind of use Sting strategically in a way that makes sense.
Well, it seems like storytelling's your favorite part of wrestling.
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, you could be the most talented technical wrestler in the world. But if you don't connect with the fans, if you don't have something about your personality or your character that makes you interesting, it's not going to get you that far. Right. And if you look at some of the biggest legends, I mean, look at the people that we grew up with.
Right.
They didn't need to do anything crazy in the ring. I mean, there's a time and a place where you do value. I mean, you value the technical ability. You value. I mean, you look at guys like I think Ricochet is an example that I always think of someone who's like super athletic and someone who can do, he can do like 3 rotations and like easily make it look like nothing. And I love that too. I'm a huge Ricochet fan. And there's a lot of guys that can do that. And it works for them. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's the character moments that we're going to remember. I always reference this from Kurt Angle's Hall of Fame induction speech back in 2017. He always talked about how his character moments, and you think of Kurt Angle with the milk truck, and you think of Kurt Angle with the little cowboy hat on. You think of him playing guitar and singing, and those are the things that stick with you forever. And obviously, Kurt Angle, I mean, I think for our time growing up, he was one of the best technical wrestlers in the game. In the game, but and I remember that as well, and I appreciate that as well. But you need to get your character over. And you need to have that in-ring psychology. You need to be able to tell a story. That's what people are going to remember. And even when I look back at some of the matches that I remember as a child, or some of the matches that really have inspired me greatly in the wrestling world, they're usually matches that have had a pretty thick storytelling background behind them. I know I had referenced this match earlier on. Last year at Revolution, we had the MJF Cody match. Mm-hmm. And that was a feud that I really, really loved because it seemed like they did a really good job of building it up over the months as like they were best friends and MJF was all about Cody. And then they had their falling out when MJF turned on Cody and cost him, his opportunity at the championship. And then they did, over the course of a couple months, they had all these stipulations that Cody had to go through in order to earn that match with MJF. And it was brutal. It was brutal. So when you finally got that match between the two of them, and again, I also just think MJF is great in the ring. He's great on the mic. He's great in the ring. He always puts on a good match for me. But it was like by the time you got to that match, you were really excited to see that match. And same with the World Championship match last night. This has been going on for so long, and it's been, they've been friends, they've been foe. There's people that have gotten mixed up in the middle of it, the Elite and the Dark Order. That's what really builds the anticipation. And so when you finally get that match, and it's a good match, you're like, okay, like it does a little something extra for you as opposed to just a good match.
Well, while we're talking about the storytelling, Son, I wonder, since you love it so much, maybe of like just this past year, what's your favorite storytelling that either company has done?
Ooh.
Damn, good question, Dylan.
Yeah, I'm a journalist, so.
Yeah, that is I really do like what they've done with the Elite and the Dark Order. I think there's so many different components to it. I think, the Dark Order has really come a long way since they started out. I remember when I was at Fyter Fest back in 2019, they did like a little vignette for the Dark Order. And it was kind of, at this point, we didn't really know much about them. It was kind of like, oh, okay, like, what is this? Yeah. Like, I don't know if this is going to work. They used to have like the creepers that came out to the ring with them. Right. It's kind of like, okay, like, it's just kind of like this spooky faction. And like, I don't really know where this is going. And then they brought in Brody Lee. And then I think, obviously following Brody Lee's passing, he really elevated everybody. Yeah. And then of course his passing was a tragedy. And I think they all became more united and sort of carrying out his legacy and making him proud. And I think that they've all really become stars because of him, and kind of coming together to honor him and live out his legacy. You've seen a lot of them really become, come more into their own. And then pairing with Adam Page and going against the Elite, and kind of like the weird psychology going on between the Young Bucks and Adam Page and Kenny, and like all the extra people that they've brought in for kind of entertainment purposes. I really enjoyed that storytelling because it's been long time. I mean, if you're someone that's followed the indies for a long time, I mean, even if you just watch AEW, for me, that was good storytelling. But if you're someone that's followed the indies and you followed these guys for years and years too, I mean, it goes even deeper. And I think, speaking, kind of jumping off of that, speaking of the Elite, I also think of Stadium Stampede, and I think of some of the things the first Stadium Stampede match, absolutely loved. But I love some of the things that they've done with that too over time, with this, Sammy Guevara getting chased by a horse and getting chased by a golf cart. And they, even in that match, they, there were some little nods to things back from, Blast from the Past, back from their indie days. And I really liked it because if you caught on to those things, cool. It added something to the match. If you didn't catch on to those little things, didn't take away anything from the match. From a WWE standpoint, I really enjoyed the first night of WrestleMania this year. I thought of the two nights. I thought that the first one for me was stronger. I loved the Bianca Sasha match. That was, especially as a woman too, as someone watching that who has seen how far the women have come from like when I was watching when I was little versus what they're doing now. I loved that moment. I did like a lot of the storytelling that they were doing with Randy Orton and Edge, because again, that's a story that has history that goes back a long ways. And I know that he's not with the company anymore, but I did really enjoy a lot of what they had done with The Fiend. And I know that was another release that I think was disappointing for a lot of
that one does hurt.
But hopefully, hopefully he'll be back at some point. I think we'll see him again
You think he'll be
somewhere.
back with WWE?
I don't know about WWE. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw him somewhere else.
Yeah.
But I do think he'll be back in some capacity somewhere at some point. At least I hope so, because I think that he's just such an incredible creative mind.
Yes.
That I think he'll continue to find ways to reinvent himself that draw us in. And I think a lot of people are here for it and waiting for it. But I thought that was the way that he, continued to reinvent himself and utilize his those vignettes that he made, and the way that he recreated his entrance, and even when they did bring in Alexa Bliss to join in on that gimmick as well, there were so many different ways in which it evolved over time. And I also think as The Fiend, he had a lot of very interesting matches with people. I can think of, I think there was a match that he had with Finn Balor where Finn's facial expressions really helped to sell that Fiend character. And so I enjoyed all of the storytelling sort of connected to him as well.
Dylan, great last question, man. I mean, Julie, holy
yeah,
shit,
that one,
dude.
that was a good one, Dylan. You got me thinking a little bit on that one.
Julie, on behalf of all the Nerds of Wrestling, myself and Dylan, thank you so much for being the very first guest.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a blast. We'll have to do this again sometime because I've got more in the tank. I could keep going.
We will absolutely 100% have you on in the near future again very soon. But until then, drop those plugs. Where can the nerds find you?
All right, so I'm on Facebook and I am on Instagram. My Instagram is at @TheCrownJewels. Crown is spelt with an E at the end, so be sure to find me on there. I'm not on Twitter right now. Maybe I'll bring it back someday. If I do, I'll let you know. But for now, you can follow me on Instagram. I've got some wrestling content on there. Got some other different kinds of content as well, other things that I like to do. But I thank you guys so much for having me. This was a great conversation, and I'm excited to do it again.
Absolutely. Julie, thank you so much. This has been the very first episode of What's Up Nerds, a podcast by Nerds of Wrestling, hosted by your boy, Justin Del Rio and Dylan. Peace out, nerds.
Peace out.